JT Crowley is talking books. On the show, you'll hear from emerging talent and seasoned veterans from around the world.
Hello, I'm JT Crowley, and I'm happy to be talking to Ralph E. Saucier about his wonderful book, The History of the Progressive Movement in the United States and How Liberalism Has Created a Mediocre Society. Ralph originated from the small town Fort Fairfield in Aroostook County, eastern Maine in the United States, where he lived with his parents and 6 other siblings. Coming from a large family, growing up in the 50s and the 60s in post-World War II America, Ralph learnt the art of adapting and coexisting with others. Those qualities he required back then still resonate with his community views today. A speech impediment resulting in a stammer meant life for Ralph in his childhood took on a different perspective. He struggled at school as the consequences of his stammering, and at times he felt isolated within himself due to his poor communication skills, and those around him very often saw him as a bit of a loner. The stammer faded over the years, and with his newfound confidence through college and numerous career opportunities, as well as public speaking, Ralph became a successful business operator. Having chatted to Ralph, I've gleaned that to compensate for his speech defect, Ralph turned to writing and reading. He confesses to being a voracious reader, something he's had to do when researching for the relevant facts about this book. Another passion of his is politics. Like his parents, in his younger days, he was a staunch advocate of the Democratic Party. But over the years, his philosophical affiliations have moved sharply to the Republican camp. Why? Let's just say, life changed his views. But all these 3 passions of his, reading, writing, and politics, are at the heart of what this book is all about, everybody. He presently lives in Beaufort, Georgia, with his wife, Gloria. So without further ado, let's invite him to come onto the show and reveal the inner essence of this phenomenal book. Ralph, come and join me.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's a phenomenal book, everybody. It's really interesting, and the history over the last 120 years is absolutely of the progressive movement, the presidents who he sees has influenced this. It's been absolutely mind-blowing for me, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Ralph, in essence, your book is how American society has progressed, albeit to you, mediocre, over the last 100 and odd years towards liberalism, and how certain US presidents have directed those changes through their political agendas. And we're talking presidents on both sides of the divide here, everybody. Have I got the flavor, the gist of your book right here by saying what I've just said?
Yes, you have, John. Yes.
So why did you choose both sides of the divide? You know, some presidents from the Democrats and some from the Republicans.
Well, basically, John, the progressive movement, many people like contributed to a particular party, but that's not so. We've had many presidents in the past on both sides of the aisle who kind of misinterpret, and the public misinterpret the word progressiveness. Progressiveness is to help people, but it is not to drain people of their funds. And we do, in the progressive movement, it is believed that, in certain areas you have to help people. But then you can go to the extreme, and what the book tried to bring out, some of these extreme movements with the presidents. And that was my main zest of the book, is to show show the public that find out what really progressiveness is. And this is why I did a lot of research on a lot of different presidents, and I kind of brought it back to the turn of the century when I feel progressiveness in my reading, in my studies, it really started and where it came to today.
Ralph, when I go on to the US Department of State's archives to get an understanding of what lies at the heart of the progressive movement in the US history, I get the impression it was a political movement that started with Presidents Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, and they were started at the turn of the 20th century to bring about further social and political reform by curbing political corruption caused by political machines and limiting the political influence of large corporations. So thus empowering the man on the street with greater liberalization. Am I right? And do you think your book paints a fair picture here?
Yes, especially when you go back to the turn of the century. Theodore Roosevelt was the first one that took advantage of, you might say, starting government programs. Before Theodore Roosevelt, there really wasn't a lot of government programs that existed, and he started the Park Department, etc. But then when you got into Woodrow Wilson, he decided that the tariff, the money coming from the United States, the tariff, was not enough to supply and do the programs he wanted. And in 1916, he created, 1913, he created the 16th Amendment with the income tax. And from there, as my book indicates, he created program after program.
You see, in your book, there are 13 chapters, and most or nearly all are identifying with a particular president and the role they played in driving the progressive movement to bring about greater liberalism to the American people. You start with chapters 1 and 2, Theodore Roosevelt, the new nationalism, and Woodrow Wilson, godfather of liberalism. How significant were these two presidents in what you could be possibly construed as the kickstarters to this political movement? You've already touched upon it, so you dumped my next question here.
Well, I emphasize those two in particular because I think I got to realize, or I got to the presidents to realize that they could have programs that could offer people more. And through the years, from the initial start of the century, it kind of created programs that I hate. I'm not sure how to put it, but it would take the liberty away from people. We were at one time a country, if you go way back before the turn of the century, that we were a country basically that would people had an awful lot of freedom. And as the century progressed, the presidents progressed, different programs, just kind of took some of that away. I think back when I was a kid in the 50s and 60s and what the country is today is really not the same country.
Ralph, you view chapter 4 in your book, and this is chapter 4 is really talking about the president Woodrow Wilson, and it's about new freedom. I think you think this is a significant chapter based on the idea that President Woodrow Wilson was considered by many as to be the father of progressiveness. Am I right in saying that this chapter 4 is so important to you?
Yes, it is. It's the whole, before Wilson, there really, like I said, there wasn't income tax, and it started to realize you could tax the people, and it continued through the years to get worse and worse. But Woodrow Wilson, with all his programs, and there are numerous programs if you go through the book on chapter 4, that he brought in as many programs as he could. But what he found out at the end of his presidency is that he only needed money to sponsor these programs because the tariff was 40% at the time, and he dropped it to 25%, but he needed to make up that dollar. So he created the income tax, and that income tax, of course, paid for the programs. And that's why they called him the father of progressiveness.
I've always wondered actually why. So you've just broadened my mind there.
Mm.
I'm sure you can appreciate that if we went through, Ralph, every chapter in your books, yes, there are 13 chapters, and each president that's linked to those chapters, we'll be here forever and a day, everybody. And the idea of the podcast, as I say to every other author I interview, or when we do the podcast, the idea is giving listeners, viewers, a flavor of what the author is writing, not to get into the great details of it, because if you want to do that, go and buy the book. The idea is to give you an insight, a flavor, and that's what we do. So I skip chapters so that you're going to get a broad view of the book. So I would like to come to, if you don't mind, to chapter 5, Franklin D. Roosevelt, New Deal, which I understand included new constraints and safeguards on the banking industry and efforts to reinflate the US economy, reform of Wall Street, relief for farmers and unemployed, social security matters. Why do you dedicate this chapter to him? Do you honestly think he played such a significant part in liberalizing America in the 1930s from the Great Depression?
Well, yeah. Well, we kind of went into the Great Depression for many reasons, and he's credited for getting us out of it, but theoretically, World War II got us out of the Depression. He had many programs, and he tried to, the TVA is one that he initiated, and that had a lot of benefits to it, especially in Tennessee, where they created the dams and everything else. But the fact of the matter is, Roosevelt, if you go through that chapter, his program after program, which we still live with today, once the government creates a program, it doesn't go away. We like to think, well, maybe it's going to go away, but it doesn't. And Roosevelt created many programs in that time period in the 30s, and after the 30s, he did not create any more programs because we had the war to contend with. Okay, but I really credit him in many ways of creating program, raising the income tax, and putting us in a situation in this country where the average person, I believe, at that time was kind of depending on the government to do what he did, and he did what he did, and we turned around, never lost those programs, and just continued paying for them through the years, creating a lot more progressiveness.
That's food for thought, particularly for me. I don't know about you viewers, but I thought that was quite an interesting response to my question there. I want to come forward now, let's, with regards to the presidents, to the presidents who are a little, some of them are still alive, to near our time at the moment. And I want to come to Bill Clinton, if you don't mind. Because that chapter, President Bill Clinton's silent liberalism, some people say he saved liberalism with his fresh political synthesis of liberal themes, backing up the civil rights movement, feminist victories gained in the 1970s, and highlighting the Republicans' views on race equalities. You have some interesting viewpoints here. Do you want to embellish? Tell us more. Why did you put him here?
Well, Bill Clinton was a politician of all politicians. He knew how to work both parties. And, he had Newt Gingrich on the Republican as the House chairperson. And, he was good. He put a lot of programs through with the Republican Party and the Democrats. And he did it very silently. It wasn't broadcast, and he put many, many programs through. He was a great politician. Probably one of the best, political presidents we ever had. But he was able to put programs through, and they say that, well, he balanced the budget. Yeah, he balanced the budget. He balanced the budget by taking a lot away. So, he was just a great silent president. He did a lot. But he did it silently.
Do you think that behind every great president, there is a phenomenal person behind them, the First Lady? And in this case, Hillary Clinton.
In this case, Hillary, from the day that Clinton was governor of Arkansas, she was behind him. That's why he put her in charge of trying to get a national health program. He thought she could get it through because she is a person very, very convincing, as we saw when she ran, for president. She's an extremely convincing person. She has a background that is probably not no other first lady could ever compare to. Okay, but I believe that she was behind him in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, she probably helped to run the White House. But she very, very, very convincing lady.
Yeah, she wasn't a first lady who's there to paint the walls or pick the curtains or the furniture for the White House. She had her own political agenda, didn't she?
I don't think she was concerned what color the curtains were.
She wasn't bothered.
No.
Can we, Ralph, go to chapter 10? Another Democrat here, Barack Obama, and social entitlement. That's the title you've given this chapter. Now, Barack Obama began his second term in office with an inaugural address calling on Americans to work together to preserve entitlements, address climate change, and to extend civil rights. He said, quote, "Together, we resolved that a great nation must care for the vulnerable and protect its people from life's worst hazards and misfortune." Was his presidency significant enough, in your eyes, Ralph, towards the progressive movement that you allocated chapter 10 to him? What did he do?
I kind of look at Barack Obama as a president who was more concerned with doing things for his party and his own well-being during his presidency. And they thought he would do a lot, for example, the Black people. He did not. Okay, unemployment went up, wages went down, and taxes went up. So he really didn't do a lot to help the American people. He created a lot of programs. His national health insurance, he said would save a lot, but it cost people $2,500 to $7,000 more for insurance. There are approximately 7,000 people that lost their insurance because of the national health care. So, he thought he was doing things that would help the majority of people, but he did not. So that's why I put him in there as extreme progressive, because the national health insurance, the affordable health care, they called it, actually cost people a lot of money. And
we're talking about Obamacare here.
No, Obamacare, yes. Yeah. Theoretically, they call it now the affordable health care. And of course, as you know, later in the years, a lot of that was taken away. For example, he had a penalty of $2,500 for anybody who didn't sign up for it. And many people found out that it was cheaper or less expensive, I should say, not to sign up for it and pay the extra tax. And that's exactly what happened. That's why a lot of it failed.
Do you see him as, the world perhaps sees him as a great orator?
He was. He could talk. Oh, yeah, he was a great orator. I don't deny that. He was able to get up and really convince people. He was a great speaker.
I agree with you, because I think he was a great speaker, a bit like Martin Luther King Jr., great speaker. And for us over here, Winston Churchill. They could all deliver a speech, because you can say a speech, but then there is saying a speech. I'm right, aren't I?
Yes. Yeah. He great. He gave a great speech, and he was great at talking. But if you look back at his background and things that happened and developed during his presidency, what he said would happen never happened. And my book brings quite a few of these things out.
So that's why you've put him in the book.
That's correct.
Well, there you go, everybody. The plot thickens, as they say. Now, without a doubt, Ralph, whether you did this consciously or unconsciously, you devote chapter 11 in your book to Donald Trump, the outsider president. You head this up.
Yes.
To many around the world, the Trump presidency was seen as chaotic, dysfunctional, divisive. Yet you devote almost 60 pages to this chapter, extolling the virtues of his term in office and to what he did for Americans. So my question to you is, why do you feel it was so necessary to apportion a fair chunk of your book to the Trump presidency?
Well, number one, Donald Trump did approximately 140 different things that helped the American people. Salaries went up, taxes went down. He had a great tax program that took tax away from the middle class, and unemployment went up, and with the Black people, Hispanic, Latins, everybody. The problem with Donald Trump and his presidency is that he did not know how to deliver it. He had good programs, and he did it, at the White House. But he had a situation where he spoke, where he antagonized. He was an antagonizer. Let's be honest about it. And you're saying that many people abroad kind of look at him being a disruptive type of president, but it wasn't in this country. A lot of people didn't. He got 30, 40, 50,000 people at rallies. I've never seen that in my life. Now, the thing is, I feel that foreign countries had more of a fear of Donald Trump than thinking he was disrupted, because, he got the NATO people or the NATO countries to pay up, and he was great at getting our hostages out of different countries. And he had a great Secretary of State at the end, not at the first, but at the end. But Donald Trump, basically, I feel foreign countries had kind of a fear of him, because I do not believe that Russia would invade Ukraine if he was president. And he had the tariff in China and the imports from China. He had that, starting to get that under control. So I think Donald Trump did a lot of things, but he just wasn't a politician. That was the main problem with Donald Trump.
But do you think, because you give your book a fair chunk to the presidency of Donald Trump, that he was significant in the progressive movement?
Well, that's a good question, because what Donald Trump did do increase our deficit. And so, there was progressiveness in his programs and what he did. He did contribute a bit to the progressive movement, absolutely. Because if you check his history, you'll find that Donald Trump was a Democrat most of his life. So it kind of reflected into him being a Republican, as a president. He was out to help people. The cost of unemployment going down in various segments of the population was not cheap. It did cost money. So the deficit did go up. We had a problem with wars, and then I think he did a good job in Afghanistan trying to get the killing down. Our loss of lives in Afghanistan dropped tremendously, at the end of his presidency. But yes, I think that was a good question, John. You know, his programs did cost, and yes, he was definitely helping in the progressive movement in this country.
I was just interested in your viewpoint there, so that's why I thought I'm going to slip that question in. um, let's go to chapter 12 here. And this is the Biden presidency, the present president. And you are saying, where are we going? Why do you say that?
Well, you know, you take a man that's been in Washington for 40, 50 years like him, he's got a lot of experience, and you think he would know basically, you which direction to put this country in for it to be, benefiting everybody. But he's not, since, he cut the Keystone line, pipe, oil line down. And I mean, he stopped the fracking, he stopped drilling in many areas of the country. And when Donald Trump left office, we were, exporting more oil than we were importing. Now, Biden got in and he did all these things with the economy. Now he's asking, the Arabs to import more oil to us. He's even going to Venezuela, which we consider, enemies, basically, to get gas. So the fact is, the gas has gone up, prices and everything gone up. I give you an example. I go shopping for my wife and I buy, the 3 dozen egg package, and it used to be $2.60. I paid $4.62 for it. So, there's nothing that Biden has done at the present time to help the country, in my opinion. And I believe he's increased, the progressiveness, and he's trying to push people towards, buying electric cars. That's fine. I have nothing against electric cars. I don't want one. But the fact is that, he's doing it at any price or cost. So I don't believe he's doing what's best for the country. And I asked, where are we going? I think if it continues at this point, we're at the end of a couple of years, the country is going more and more towards socialism. And I think somewhere along the line that people in the United States are going to say enough is enough, because we love our freedom. The American people are just, we love our freedom, and there's a certain point where it's going to have to stop. So that's why I say that, where's this country going?
Because it's quite a short chapter. And I suppose it's short because he's still, he's the sitting president, and he's only been there for about, coming up to 2 years? Whereas the others, some did 4 years and some did 8 years. So they've had a bit more history to them, haven't they?
Well, we're hoping that the 4 years is it.
Now.
That's what we're hoping. A lot of us are.
I'm curious here. Once people have read your book, Ralph, what are the key messages you want them to take away and think about?
That's a good question. I'm going to put my glass on to read this, because it's something many Americans don't realize was the progressive is. Progressives have to be paid by people. People have to realize that the more programs the government give out, the more it's going to cost you. It's like my father taught me. He may have been a strong advocate Democrat. One day, I made a mistake of saying something about Franklin Roosevelt, and I thought he was going to throw me out of the house. But the fact of the matter is, I was raised in a sense that if you want something and you're going to work for it and you're going to get paid for it, if you don't work for it, you're just not going to get it. Okay. And it seems like, the majority of people in this country do not realize, especially, the younger people that are, they're in college. They don't realize the progressives is going to take things away from them. And this is what I try to bring out, that the more programs we have from the government, the more it's going to cost you, the more, the less freedom you're going to have. That's really the message I was trying to get across.
Who do you visualize reading your book But more importantly, who would you want to read your book?
Who would I want? I really would love to see the younger generation read my book, because many of people my age, we know just what direction they are. But I'd like to see people from 18 to 45 in that area, read the book. The younger people who haven't lived through the 50s and 60s. I mean, the 50s and 60s to me were just, I look at the movie American Graffiti, and that was my teenage years, just before the Vietnam War, And then Vietnam War came, and I volunteered. I went in for 6 years, along with many friends.
Mine was the 80s.
All right, 80s. No, the 80s. I was raising 2 kids, and I was going in business, and I
So
had
what do you call your kids?
Pardon, sir?
What do you call your kids?
My kids are both diehard Republicans. They had no choice.
No, but what do you call them?
My son is Ralph Jr., excuse me. And my daughter, is Sherry Lynn.
Are they proud of you when you write your books?
I would say my son is, and my daughter read it, and she absolutely loved it. She was definitely into it. I'm trying to get my grandchildren to read it. One is married and expecting a baby. That would be my first great grandchild. And then my other granddaughter is getting ready to go to college. And then my grandson is only 16 years old. But they have, well, the mother got a copy, but the kids don't.
Yet.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yet.
But I would like to see like college kids. I think it would be a great book for the younger generation to read and understand just where this country came from, where it's going, and what has happened to this country in the past 100 years.
So would you like to see your book in the libraries at universities?
I would very much. My first book wound up at the library at Oxford University, actually.
Wow. Ralph, where can people get a copy of your book from?
Well, I have a website, saucierhome.com, SAUCIERHOME.com. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble website, Books A Million, and any other international book website. It's on. I have got the marking out to all of these.
But your publishers are Universe?
Pardon, sir?
Your publishers are Universe?
Sorry, yes, I Universe, but I don't believe you can buy directly from them. You would have to buy from me to go through iUniverse, because if you buy from me, I go to iUniverse. But most of the people that I have sold so far is Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Yeah. Just on a personal note, Ralph, people with a speech impediment, what do you say to them to achieve their own goals in life?
I was so bad I couldn't talk to my mother, and it's really not really forcing, but I took public speaking courses, and I, and it helped me a lot. But one of the biggest things I believe has helped me is starting to have a lot of faith in yourself. I think people with speech impediments kind of lose the aspect that they're as good as the next person, and not get tied up in what you're trying to say, but feel and talk from the heart.
Do you know somebody, a famous person who had a speech impediment?
That's interesting.
British.
Pardon?
He was British.
Yes, that was King George.
Indeed.
Yeah.
King George VI.
He had a very bad impediment. Yes. Yeah.
The Queen's father.
I understand Abraham Lincoln did too, and he overcame it. So yeah, King George. I saw the movie and the instructor he had to try to get him over it and everything else. It was a great, it was a great movie.
It was an American who got him over it.
An American.
He was American, yes. Who they went to overcome his stammer. There you go. Anyway, Ralph, I have to say I've thoroughly enjoyed your book. It's been eye-opening for me. It's been inspiring for me. And I'm sure all the viewers and listeners who are going to be looking at the podcast, reading the introduction, are going to find it exactly the same. So I simply say, Ralph E. Saucier, thank you for coming on my show. It's been a great pleasure.
Well, thank you. I was very honored to do this with you. I mean, I wish I would have had you for my first book.
We'll come to that one later.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later. Well, thank you very much, John, and God bless you.
So, everybody, as I end the podcast every time, I'm JD Crowley. Thanks for listening, watching, wherever you are in the world. So until next time, stay safe.